This one mental shift made me unstoppable, and no one ever taught it to me in school, not in a textbook, not in a classroom, and definitely not from the people who claimed to have my best interests at heart. It wasn't motivation, it wasn't discipline. It was something deeper way of thinking that rewired how I saw time, effort, success, even myself. And once it clicked, everything changed instantly. You stop operating like everyone else. You stop chasing, you start building. But to understand how powerful this shift really is, you have to see where it started. And escaping it, that's where everything changed. The hidden programming. You didn't know you were taught how to follow instructions before you ever learned how to question them. From the moment you could hold a pencil, the system had a plan for you. Raise your hand, stay in line, wait your turn, fill in the blank, memorize the answer, get it right and you're rewarded, get it wrong and you're corrected over and over, day after day. And so you learned the pattern, obey the system, play the game, do what's expected. Don't disrupt, don't question, just comply. At first it feels harmless. You're just doing what everyone else is doing. It's safe, structured, predictable. But over time, something subtle starts to happen, something you don't even notice until it's too deep. You stop asking, what do I want? And start asking, what do they want from me? That shift is invisible. You don't feel it happening, but it's there, like rust in the gears, quietly eroding your sense of direction, your curiosity, your sense of self. You learn how to meet deadlines, but not how to set vision. You learn how to study for tests, but not how to study yourself. You learn how to prepare for interviews, but not how to prepare for a life that actually fulfills you. And then one day you wake up inside a life you don't remember choosing. You're working a job that was supposed to be good enough. You're chasing goals that sounded right on paper. Your calendar is full, your plate is full, your mind is full, but your soul empty. You feel busy, you feel stressed, but you don't feel alive. And still everyone tells you you're doing great because you're checking all the boxes. You're efficient, you're dependable, you're the model example of how to do things right. But here's the trap no one talks about. You can spend your entire life performing well in a system that was never designed for you to win. You're praised for being productive, but no one asks if what you're producing actually means anything to you. You're celebrated for being consistent, but no one wonders if you're consistent at the wrong things. They don't teach you how to think. They teach you how to comply. They don't teach you how to build. They teach you how to maintain. And the longer you stay in that loop, the harder it becomes to imagine anything else. You start believing this is just how life works. You go to school, you get a job, you get a paycheck, you wait. Wait for direction, wait for permission, wait for someone else to validate that you're finally on the right path. But the truth is brutal. No one is coming. No one is going to hand you clarity. No one is going to teach you how to take control because control doesn't fit into a curriculum. Autonomy doesn't show up on a syllabus. Ownership can't be graded, and that's why no one teaches it in school, because ownership doesn't serve the system, it threatens it. But one day, something cracks. The script breaks. You stop and ask the one question the system never prepared you for. What if I've been playing the wrong game? And that's when the ground beneath you starts to shift. The rules you followed so carefully begin to look suspicious. The path you've been walking suddenly feels narrow. You start to wonder if maybe, just maybe, the version of you the system trained isn't the real you at all. And it's in that moment, in that sliver of discomfort and curiosity, that the shift reveals itself. Because the moment you stop waiting and start thinking differently, everything begins to crack open. And that's when the real transformation begins. The shift that changed everything. You didn't stumble into it. You didn't find it in a book or a podcast or some viral post. It came like a whisper, not loud, but undeniable. It happened in a moment when you were fed up, tired of working hard and going nowhere, tired of being busy but feeling behind, tired of chasing every next step they told you to take, only to feel more lost. At the end of each one, you started to feel like you were running in a maze where every turn looked the same. Wake up, check your phone, work, reply, rush, sleep, repeat. The more you pushed, the more you felt stuck. The more you followed the plan, the more it felt like someone else's life. And then it hit you, quietly but with force. You asked a dangerous question, the kind of question most people spend their whole lives avoiding. What if? I've been thinking about all of this completely wrong. Not what if I'm not trying hard enough, not what if I need a new goal, but what if I'm playing the wrong game entirely? And the moment that question took root, the old system started to fall apart. Not because you gave up, but because you started seeing through it. It exposed the real problem, not your lack of motivation, not your schedule, not your intelligence, your lens, the way you've been trained to see everything, the default frame you inherited without realizing it, the rules you never agreed to, but followed anyway. You've been looking through the wrong lens your entire life. You were trained to see everything in terms of tasks. What needs to get done? What's the next assignment? What's the most urgent thing right now? It turns you into a responder, a reactor, a checklist machine. That mindset makes you efficient but hollow. You become a human to-do list, capable, reliable, but directionless. You hit every target except the one that actually matters to you. You're stuck in execution mode, constantly solving short-term problems, but never building long-term outcomes. You're busy without a blueprint, exhausted without a mission, and this is where the shift happens, because one day you stop thinking in tasks and you start thinking in ownership. You stop asking, what should I do today? And you start asking, what am I building this week, this month, this year? You stop reacting. You start architecting. You're not trying to check the box anymore. You're trying to shape something that lasts, something that moves the needle, something that compounds. That's the shift no one teaches in school, because school doesn't reward ownership. It rewards completion. It trains you to deliver work, not to question whether the work is worth doing, not to create your own map, not to build systems that outlast your own presence. And that's why this shift feels so strange at first, because no one claps when you think long term, no one gives you a grade for clarity, no one cheers when you delete 90% of your to-do list, because only one thing truly matters. But here's what happens when the shift clicks. You stop seeking permission, you stop trying to impress, you start to lead even if no one is following yet. You don't need applause, you don't need validation, because you've already seen the difference. You begin to treat your time like a builder, not a borrower. Every choice becomes a brick, every day becomes a layer, every action starts serving a direction instead of just filling space. You stop drifting, you start aligning, and for the first time, you feel it, that quiet sense of power returning to you. Not because things got easier, but because they finally made sense. The shift wasn't about doing more, it was about finally seeing what mattered. But knowing the shift isn't enough. Now you have to live it, and that's where everything gets harder and more real. The identity reboot. At first, it felt like a costume, like you were pretending. You had made the mental shift, but your environment didn't change. Your habits didn't change. Your life looked the same on the outside, and part of you didn't believe you deserved to think this way yet, because the old identity still lingered. The one that played it safe, that followed the script, that waited for instructions, that measured success by how busy you looked, not by what you were actually building. You had the new lens, but you were still wearing the old uniform, still surrounded by old patterns, still hearing the voice in your head saying, who do you think you are? And so, even after the shift, you still found yourself slipping back into old loops, old distractions, old ways of working that felt productive but produced nothing. You checked tasks off your list, but nothing real moved. You filled your calendar, but not your life. It's in that gray zone where most people give up, because ownership thinking feels lonely at first. You're no longer playing by their rules, but you haven't built your own rule book yet. You feel untethered, like you're floating between who you were and who you want to become. And in that space, doubt creeps in. You start second guessing everything. Should I really be thinking this big? What if I'm just making it all up? What if I fail? What if everyone was right and I was wrong? But here's the truth no one talks about. Every new identity feels like fiction in the beginning. You don't step into it fully formed. You grow into it. You build it with action, one aligned decision at a time, one moment of clarity, one act of courage that no one sees but you. And slowly, the gap starts to close. You stop pretending. You start becoming. You stop trying to look like the person you're becoming, and you start acting like them before you feel ready. You wake up, and instead of asking, what do I need to finish today? You ask, what would the version of me in becoming do today? And then you do it. Not because it's easy, but because you're done waiting to feel ready. You're done needing proof before you act. You act because that's what ownership demands. This is the identity reboot. It's not clean. It's not comfortable. It's messy. It's uncertain. It's frustrating. It feels like 100 tiny deaths. But every time you shed a layer of your old self, you get one step closer to alignment. You're no longer dragging your body through someone else's schedule. You're moving with intention because your actions finally match your direction. You realize that no one was ever going to give you permission to lead your own life. That permission was never going to arrive in an email or a meeting or a compliment. You had to grant it to yourself. And when that clicks, you stop waiting. You stop asking. You stop seeking external confirmation. You start building without apology. You stop explaining your clarity to people who still live in confusion. But ownership doesn't come without cost, because the moment you claim responsibility for your future, you also inherit the weight of your failures. The spotlight no longer moves. It's fixed on you, and that's the next battle no one prepares you for: the price of ownership. Ownership sounds powerful until you realize what it actually requires, because the moment you say, this is mine to build, you also say, this is mine to break. There's no one left to blame, no teacher to say you weren't taught, no boss to say you weren't led, no system to point fingers at, just you, your direction, your choices, your results. And that's where most people quietly turn back, not because they're incapable, but because they're terrified of what happens when excuses no longer protect them. It's easier to call yourself unlucky than to admit you didn't prepare. It's easier to blame your past than to take
take control of your future. At first, ownership feels like a heavy weight pressing down on your chest. Every decision carries consequences. Every mistake cuts deeper. Every delay feels like sabotage. You can't hide behind busyness anymore. You can't drown in tasks and pretend it's progress. Because now your results are a reflection of your direction, not just your effort. And that's the cost. That's the tax you pay when you stop being a follower and start being a builder. But here's what no one tells you. That weight you're carrying, it's not punishment, it's pressure. And pressure doesn't destroy you, it forges you. That responsibility you feel, that's the beginning of alignment. Because when failure is yours, so is growth. So is clarity. So is power. You'll
stop waiting to be rescued. You stop hoping that circumstances will magically shift. You stop waking up reactive and start living deliberately. You begin to look at your challenges differently. When you fail, and yes, you will fail, you won't spiral anymore. You won't panic. You'll study. You'll tweak. You'll ask better questions. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And you start asking, what is this trying to teach me? That shift alone is everything. Because when even your losses have value, you become unshakable. When even your worst day has meaning, you become untouchable. You realize that pain can either be a prison or a compass, and you start using it as fuel. And the best part, no one can take that from you. You've stopped outsourcing your power. You've stopped looking for someone to validate your effort. You've stopped handing your future to people who don't understand your mission. You're no longer working for someone else's scoreboard. You're building your own game, a game where your rules apply, a game where you decide what winning looks like. Yes, it costs more. Yes, it's harder. Yes, it requires more of you than you thought you had. But the payoff, it's not just success, it's peace, it's alignment, it's waking up in the morning and knowing without a doubt you're no longer drifting through life reacting. You're driving it. You're building something real. You begin to move with a quiet confidence, not because you have all the answers, but because you finally stopped looking for someone else to give them to you. And when that takes root, everything changes. You stop chasing. You stop proving. You start building. You build leverage with your habits. You build momentum with your mindset. You build a life that doesn't collapse the moment things get hard, because now you're not just moving with purpose, you're building with power, and power compounds. And this is where everything begins to multiply. The leverage loop. Up until now, you've been taught to trade time for progress. Work harder, stay later, push through, grind. That's what they told you. And for a while, it worked. You got the grades, you met the deadlines, you hit the targets, you told yourself you were making progress because the hours were piling up. But then something shifted. The math stopped working. You still showed up. You still worked hard. But no matter how much effort you poured in, you weren't moving. The progress slowed, the breakthroughs stalled, and no matter how much harder you tried, it felt like you were stuck on a treadmill sprinting in place. That's when it hits you. Effort isn't enough anymore. You've been operating like a machine, measuring your value by how much you output, how fast you move, how busy you look. But machines don't scale, and neither do you if all you're doing is grinding harder without building smarter. And this is where the next layer of the shift reveals itself. You stop asking, how can I work more? You start asking, how can I work once and benefit forever? Because once you think in ownership, you stop measuring your life by effort and start measuring it by leverage. Leverage is the turning point. It's what separates people who burn out from people who break through. Leverage is systems that run without your constant input. Leverage is skills that compound whether or not anyone's watching. Leverage is one clear decision that removes 10 future problems. Leverage is habits that run silently in the background, protecting your time while you focus on your mission. You stop repeating yourself. You stop reinventing the wheel every Monday. You stop solving the same problem over and over just because you're too busy to design a solution that solves it permanently. You begin to shift your energy from reactive to proactive. You build templates. You write checklists. You record the process. You delegate what drains you. You automate what's predictable. You document what works so you can replicate it, share it, and scale it. Not because you're lazy, but because you finally understand your time is too expensive to waste. You begin to think like a builder. You ask, what can I create today that saves me 100 hours this year? What can I design once that pays me back every week without fail? And that mindset unlocks the loop, the leverage loop. Design it, test it, refine it, repeat. Every new system becomes a force multiplier. Every good decision creates a ripple effect. Every solved problem becomes a platform for the next. Now, your calendar isn't just full, it's functional. Now your routines aren't just rigid, they're refined. Now your work isn't just effort, it's engineering. You stop trying to outrun the clock. You start designing around it. You stop asking for more hours in the day. You start asking how you can make 1 hour do the work of 10, and suddenly everything compounds. You're no longer trying to keep up with the pace of the world. You're creating a new pace, your own. And this time it's sustainable, scalable, strategic. You stop building a schedule. You start building a system, one that gives more than it takes, one that frees your mind to focus, one that builds leverage even while you sleep. That's the quiet revolution happening inside you. You're not chasing freedom anymore. You're constructing it. But just when you start to taste the reward, something unexpected happens. It's not the system that fights you back. When the world doesn't understand you, at first it feels empowering. You've made the shift. You're thinking in ownership. You're building leverage. You finally feel like you're moving with purpose. Your days aren't random anymore, they're intentional. You wake up knowing exactly why you're doing what you're doing, and for once, it feels like your life is actually yours. But then something unexpected happens. The world starts to push back, not violently, not always obviously, but slowly, subtly, consistently. People who used to admire your hustle begin to question your silence. Friends notice you've become less available. Coworkers say you've changed. Family members look at you differently. You start hearing things like, "You've been quiet lately," or "You used to be so fun," or "You're always working now." And they're not wrong. You have changed. But what they don't realize is you had to, because staying the same was slowly killing your momentum. It was draining your clarity. It was suffocating your potential. You're not interested in performing anymore. You're not here to look productive. You're here to build something real, something sustainable, something that actually matters to you, not just something that pleases everyone else. But the people around you, they're still operating in the old system. They still measure effort by exhaustion. They still think success means being constantly available, constantly reactive, constantly proving, and now they don't recognize you. That's the cost of shifting your identity. You start saying no more often, not to be rebellious, but to stay in alignment. You start protecting your mornings not for luxury, but for clarity. You start choosing depth over drama, clarity over chaos, silence over noise. You begin drawing boundaries, not walls, but gates. Gates that open only for what moves your mission forward. And the world doesn't like that, because when you change your rhythm, it threatens theirs. When you stop playing their game, it makes them question the game itself. So they push back, not always directly, sometimes with silence, sometimes with guilt, sometimes with subtle jabs that sound like concern. You've been distant. You're not as fun as you used to be. You think you're better than us now. No, you don't think you're better. You're not trying to outgrow anyone. You're just trying to grow, period. And growth demands space. Space to think, space to build, space to become. You just finally stopped waiting to feel ready. You stopped seeking permission to take yourself seriously. You stopped apologizing for wanting more. And that kind of clarity, it makes people uncomfortable because your presence used to validate their patterns. And now your focus exposes their distractions. Your alignment makes them question their avoidance. Your transformation reminds them that change is possible, and that can be threatening to someone who hasn't started yet. But here's what you learn. Not everyone's supposed to understand your path. They weren't there when you were drowning in distraction. They didn't feel the pressure when you were chasing everything and achieving nothing. They didn't sit in the silence when you questioned whether you were wasting your life. They didn't see the nights you stayed up, wondering if this version of life was all there was. This shift was never about impressing them. It was about reclaiming yourself. Reclaiming your direction, reclaiming your time, your energy, your truth. And that's when it hits you. This isn't a productivity hack. This isn't a mindset tip. This isn't some trendy self-help trick. This is a new identity, built by you, defined by you, protected by you. And the further you walk in it, the less approval you need, the less validation you seek, the less noise you tolerate, because you're no longer trying to be understood. You're focused on being aligned. You're focused on being effective. You're focused on building something that outlasts this week's opinions. And the final piece of this shift, it's not just about who you are. It's about what you decide to do next when no one's clapping and no one's watching. That's where the real power kicks in, when you keep showing up, not to be seen, but because you've made a decision. And from here on out, the path is yours. The shift no one can unteach. At some point, there's no going back, not because the world changed, but because you did. You don't wake up frantic anymore. You don't scroll through your morning like you're searching for direction. You open your eyes with a sense of weight, not the kind that crushes you, but the kind that reminds you you're building something that matters. This is what the shift creates. It's not about working harder. It's not about getting up at 5 a.m. or cramming your calendar with fake productivity. It's about moving through the world like you finally know what you're here to do. You're no longer just checking boxes. You're building something that compounds. And every move you make, every no has intention behind it. You don't need external pressure anymore. You don't need someone watching over your shoulder. You don't need another app or planner or motivational video, because the engine is internal now. The accountability is personal, the clarity is real. And here's the truth. Once you've made this shift, once you've lived in this frame, once you've felt what it's like to move with agency, you can never go back. Going back feels like betrayal. Mediocrity feels toxic. Distraction feels like self-harm. Because now you know, now you see. You see how much time you used to waste. You see how many fake goals you used to chase. You see how many people were leading lives that looked impressive but felt hollow. You're done with that. You don't chase attention. You create traction. You don't chase approval. You move in alignment. You don't wait for the perfect moment. You create momentum. This is the shift. From passive to present, from overwhelmed to intentional, from conditioned to conscious. No one taught it to you. You had to unlearn everything just to see it. But now that it's yours, no one can take it from you. Not the system, not your past, not the fear, not the noise. You're no longer trying to find your place in the world. You're building your place in it, brick by brick, hour by hour, decision by decision. This is the shift no one teaches in school, and now you don't need them to.